Whitman has changed a lot since it opened. There were students, issues, and relationships just like our own. Many people have walked Whitman's halls, each with their own story to tell. This is the story of Jonathan Young, a graduate that Whitman won't be quick to forget.
My name is Jonathan Young, and I'm currently Chief Operating Officer of a biotechnology company.
So you've had quite a ride getting to where you are today, but let's start at high school. You're a Whitman alum. What year did you graduate?
1987.
87. What was Whitman like when you were there? And I was looking through some of the old articles, and it just seemed very different. Like kind of the fights for gender equality in the sports teams, and there were some concerts for apartheid. So what was it like, not only from like a political perspective, but as a student?
I do remember the apartheid being very, very active politically at the time. But for me, it was hard coming to Whitman because I moved here my sophomore year in high school from upstate New York, and I came from a really small town. And so Whitman just seemed kind of very different from the small little town that I grew up with. You know, a lot of money, a lot of people are very sophisticated and, cliquey like any school. And so I think at first I felt very much, you know, alone, kind of trying to figure out how to make my way. And so for me, the wrestling team, once that started, October or so that sophomore year, that's really where things started to click.
Jonathan joined the wrestling team in October of his sophomore year, and there he was able to find his, as he put it, clique. The older players supported him and provided him a foundation for him to feel at home at Whitman. He quickly rose through the ranks and became one of Whitman's star wrestlers.
The wrestling team just came to be like a family for me. And so pretty much my experience, I wasn't a very good student, to be honest. I wasn't really dialed in politically, even though I went into politics later. I think I was just really focused on the wrestling team. That's really where my energies were. I don't know, there was just kind of a magic to it. I mean, it's like, it's just a sport on one level, but when I just think back, I mean, we hung out socially, and so we were hanging out throughout the year, especially my buddy Steve Siegel, who was a weight class above me. We'd be going to wrestling camps together and like wrestling tournaments throughout the year. And then, Jim Douglas, I think he gets tons of credit for really cultivating the sense of family. So I have these great images of Jim just standing outside his door for his, biology classroom, and he'd be kind of like calling out folks as we were walking down the halls to like recruit people, but more fundamentally was just really looking out for all of the wrestlers. Yeah, and so one thing I should say. So part of what made it all special too, we were historically not a very good team.
Okay.
When I joined, there was this guy Dan Gustafson, who was one of the heavier weight guys, and he was one of the best we'd had in some time, but we'd never sort of won the county tournament before, never really placed any individual wrestler in the state tournament. And my junior and senior years, we were undefeated, and won the county tournament both years. Just developed this like powerhouse wrestling experience.
However, on December 19th of his senior year, Jonathan had a wrestling accident at one of his games that changed the course of his life.
Um, um, my injury, I'd finished third in the state my junior year. I was ranked first in the state my senior year. I was on a roll in the beginning of the year. All of my matches were by pins. 5 of them were in the first minute. And then at a holiday tournament, I tried to throw my opponent. And so I was on bottom, he was on top. I stood up, and he was trying to run me to the sidelines. And this is a move I'd done before successfully. It didn't work out so well this time. But I tried to throw him, basically like reaching behind and kind of grabbing the arm and around the back. But before he had a chance to come around to his back, we both fell forward to my head. And so it was the combination of, the speed of running, the force of the throw, the weight of both of us, and I couldn't brace the fall at all because my arms were behind me. And then, paralyzed from the neck down, instantly. I fell just a few feet from my wrestling coaches who were in the corner, and probably like 10 feet from my father, who was videotaping the match. And so he was right there. And crazily enough, one of the things I remember, there was some, kid was like, well, let's roll him over and take his blood pressure. They didn't have a paramedic on site. They had like a freshman biology student who was like volunteering.
Yeah.
And if you know anything in the world about spinal cord injury, the one thing you don't want to do is move the person.
Yeah.
But fortunately, my dad was there and just refused to have anybody, touch me until the ambulance did arrive. And first went to Montgomery General Hospital, and then went by helicopter to MedStar Trauma Center in downtown DC.
Jonathan had a long road to recovery in many senses. The first 3 weeks after his recovery were spent in the acute care hospital, after which he was transferred to the rehabilitation hospital for 3 months. At the time, these 3.5 months were remarkably fast for a spinal cord injury, which could have some in the hospital for a year recovering.
So is it common for somebody to have recovered to a stage that you have, or based on your injury, in the moment you said you were paralyzed from the neck down, is it typical to stay paralyzed?
Yeah, so I was unlucky with the injury, but lucky anatomically. And so even though I lost, or the vertebrae moved so much, there was enough room for the cord to be compressed and bruised, but not severed. So my injury is what's called incomplete, meaning the cord was not completely severed, just sort of bruised and damaged. Most spinal cord injuries are actually incomplete on impact, but to my point about not moving, people will then get a person out of the water and then kind of move the neck around. But even for people that are incomplete, I mean, I think it's unusual to have as much of a recovery as I did if you look at like the magnitude of the impact. I was super determined to walk again. I remember being in the hospital and I would just like look at every part of my body, be like, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then when something would twitch, it'd be like, and then I would just like up, down that body part like all day long. So I think I was lucky anatomically, but then certainly I think I was in great conditioning for wrestling, and then I think I was just super determined to get back as much as I could.
Jonathan emphasized repeatedly that in high school, he didn't push himself academically. To him, Whitman was wrestling. All this changed when he had his accident. He recognized that he had to shift his focus now to his studies.
I went straight on to college, a master's degree, a PhD program, and then 1996, so about 95, like 9 years after the injury, I went through a really, really difficult period of depression. I think I kind of hadn't really been dealing with the injury, just kind of running on to the next thing, and that kind of like caught up with me. And I think a big key for me then was, instead of trying to kind of pass as normal and like be embarrassed or ashamed of a disability, trying to really embrace that as a part of who I am, not unlike other civil rights movements.
Jonathan's story is one of perseverance, of self-encouragement, and awareness. In his teenage years, Jonathan spoke at graduation and won a Victory Award alongside the likes of Gelsey Kirkland and Ray Charles. He now works at a biotechnology company that he co-founded, and he has found his way back to the Whitman area. Sometimes legacies come from misfortunes, but even if they don't, hard work and dedication are imperative to personal success.